Denberg, what is happening? Where has our delightful introduction gone?
Oh, well, we've, replaced it, sir.
Replaced it? With what?
Do you not listen to the show either?
Of course I do, but I always sort of skipped the beginning when listening.
You skipped the intro?
Yes, but during recording, I enjoyed having those few extra moments to sip some coffee and gather my thoughts.
All my hard work, and dare I say, brilliant performance, skipped. I swear no one respects what I do here.
What exactly do you do here?
I'm still not entirely sure, sir, but you wish to know about the cold opens, do you?
Oh, yes.
We have been surreptitiously recording conversations in the break room and the newsroom that might be interesting and airing them at the top of the show.
What? That is utter rhubarb. And did I not say that there would be retribution if I found you all recorded me again without my knowledge? Well, retribution is coming, but first, the news. Apologies for that aside, dear audience. I'm rarely so overcome. As always, this is yesterday's news today, and I am Jonathan T. McNally. Let us begin. Our first, and certainly our biggest story, continues to unfold as we speak. We mentioned briefly at the start of last week's show that President Donald J. Trump has tested positive for coronavirus. Since that news broke, there have been non-stop updates and ramifications rattling around our nation's capital, with seemingly something new and of note happening every other hour, every day this week. I shall attempt to cover it all as succinctly and completely as possible. The first big moment after the president was admitted to Walter Reed Medical Center for complications from COVID-19 occurred Sunday evening. He was driven from the hospital in an SUV with the windows up to wave at supporters. Current and former Secret Service agents spoke anonymously to the Washington Post, saying that they were aghast that agents in the vehicle had their lives endangered for what some have called a publicity stunt. Medical professionals have also been extremely critical of this action, with Dr. James Phillips, physician at Walter Reed, saying that the agents did not have fully appropriate PPE. Former campaign manager for Mr. Trump, Corey Lewandowski, addressed these concerns by saying that the Secret Service agents volunteered for the drive, and also that the president's physician approved the trip. As to why the trip was embarked upon, White House officials said that the recovering commander-in-chief, quote, wanted to show strength, and advisors informed the Washington Post that the president had become, quote, bored in the hospital. During his 3-night hospital stay, Mr. Trump was given a mix of medications, including an experimental antibody treatment currently in clinical trials, remdesivir and dexamethasone. This final item is a steroid that has been known to cause agitation, psychosis, and feelings of invincibility. Many have theorized that these side effects could have been the cause for a rather intense series of chirps from Mr. Trump's Twitter. In these, he railed against Joe Biden, Michelle Obama, and the media. He also criticized Nancy Pelosi for the cost of her proposed stimulus plan, which he said would be misused to bail out Democrat-run states. In these messages, he called off stimulus talks, which caused a massive sell-off on Wall Street. This series of events led House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to introduce legislation that would create a bipartisan commission to determine a sitting president's ability to carry out the duties of the office. This is based on the 25th Amendment to the Constitution, which outlines procedures for transferring power to the Vice President in case of the President's death, incapacitation, removal, or resignation. Members of the proposed commission would be selected by Democrats and Republicans and would be composed of medical professionals and former high-ranking executive branch officials. The Speaker said that this was not made specifically for the President, but suggested recent events necessitated its consideration. On Monday, the president returned home. As Marine One flew away, he removed his mask, saluted the helicopter, and entered the White House still without a mask. He was visibly short of breath. White House spokesman Judd Deere said later that they are taking every precaution necessary to protect the president, his family, and the White House staff. Mr. Trump was to be receiving few visitors who were required to wear protective equipment, and he would be surrounded by around-the-clock medical staff. The CDC suggests that those infected with COVID-19 should avoid contact with others for 10 days, with severe cases requiring up to 20 days of isolation. The New York Times has reported that 2 housekeepers have also tested positive, but they were told to use discretion when discussing it. The infections have spread far beyond the first family. According to an internal FEMA memo obtained by ABC News from Wednesday, 34 people connected to the White House have tested positive. Those closest to the president include political advisor Hope Hicks, RNC Chair Ronna McDaniel, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, Chief of Oval Office Operations Nicholas Luna, Counselor to the President Kellyanne Conway, as well as her daughter, White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany, and Policy Advisor Stephen Miller. Additionally, 3 Republican senators have been diagnosed with coronavirus, raising concerns about re-election campaigns and the confirmation vote for Supreme Court Justice nominee Amy Coney Barrett. Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson confirmed that he would be there to vote to confirm no matter what, even going so far as to say, "I'll go in a moon suit." Since news broke about the president's diagnosis, there has been much speculation as to the cause of the outbreak. Mr. Trump has made remarks that indicate he may have been infected at an indoor event honoring Gold Star families of fallen service members. He said that people from the military really want to come over and hug him for having done a good job for them. A statement earlier this week said no symptoms had yet been reported by those in attendance. A more likely event was the announcement of Amy Coney Barrett's nomination, which occurred in the Rose Garden the previous day. The proceedings went against local ordinance in Washington, D.C. due to the size of the gathering and how many attendees chose to forego wearing masks. Many of the previously mentioned infected were in attendance. This gathering that Dr. Anthony Fauci has called a super-spreader event has resulted in little contact tracing, which has been highly recommended by medical professionals to prevent further spread of infection. Various news outlets have been attempting to gauge the spread, despite these measures. One report showed that the president's family and campaign staff did not follow the rules at last week's presidential debate. While attendees were required to obtain a negative COVID test on campus within 72 hours of the debate, according to the Cleveland Clinic which co-hosted the event, each campaign was responsible for testing their own personnel. They further took measures of social distancing, hand sanitizing, temperature checks, and masking. But several members of the first family and staff removed their masks while seated and refused Cleveland Clinic staff members' request to replace them. At the end of the debate, First Lady Melania Trump approached the stage still without a mask. During that debate, the soon-to-be infected president criticized his opponent by saying, quote, "I don't wear face masks like him. Every time you see him, he's got a mask." End quote. Further analysis by USA Today scoured photos, news coverage, and attendance logs for events that Mr. Trump, his aides, and allies attended during their infection window. From a religious summit outside Atlanta, to a political rally in Pennsylvania, to a fundraiser in Minnesota. At least 6,000 people attended events with those who were at the Rose Garden announcement, 120 of which determined to be dangerously close to those infected. As of Friday, Mr. Trump was announcing that he was cured of the virus and off medications to treat COVID-19. He returned to the campaign trail with his first event following his bout with coronavirus having taken place on the 10th. Hundreds came to the White House lawn with red hats and no masks. It is unknown if Mr. Trump has yet received a negative coronavirus test. In-person rallies are scheduled in Pennsylvania and Iowa this week, but the president refused to participate in this week's debate against candidate Joe Biden. As Mr. Trump has recovered, he has maintained a message to Americans that they need not be afraid of COVID, telling people, don't let it dominate your life. Critics caution that everyday citizens may not have access to the same health care as the President of the United States. Dr. David Nace of the University of Pittsburgh's Medical Center says, most of the people aren't so lucky to have an in-house medical unit and access to experimental treatments. The country has surpassed 210,000 deaths from coronavirus, more than any other nation, even when population sizes are taken into account. A recent report by Vox indicates that misinformation from the White House may have been a contributing factor, as the president has reportedly questioned the efficacy of masks, supported unproven treatments, and continues to promise a vaccine that experts believe is still a ways away. Many states are also now reporting a resurgence in cases. Additionally, millions are still recovering from the economic fallout of the pandemic. As much of the support from the last round of federal stimulus aid has dwindled, many across the nation are facing homelessness, unemployment, hunger, and utility shutoffs. According to the National Energy Assistance Directors Association, 179 million Americans could be at risk of losing utility service. After the president called off stimulus talks earlier in the week, small business owners told the Washington Post that they will need to start cutting workers if more aid does not come soon. There briefly seemed to be hope on this front as, with his return, Mr. Trump fully reversed course on stimulus talks, now urgently calling for an agreement to be reached. His new plan included a new round of stimulus checks to U.S. citizens and held a $1.8 trillion price tag. Unfortunately, Republican senators rejected this, saying that the cost was too high, and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said she could not agree to it without significant changes. She cited a lack of spending for unemployment insurance, state and local aid, and child care, as well as reckless language providing liability protections for businesses. She wrote that she is hopeful that the two sides would reach an agreement, but the strong opposition from both the left and the right makes such optimism questionable. It is unknown when the nation may see relief from the pandemic that has now reached into the halls of our very highest levels of government. This situation is ongoing, and there will surely be much more to report on in the coming weeks. But for now, here is Denberg with a word from our sponsors.
There are no sponsors, Jonathan. You know that there are no sponsors.
Of course, Denberg. But perhaps you can provide us with one of those mildly amusing or greatly informative public service announcements of yours instead.
No, sir, I don't think I will.
You aren't still upset about the intro, are you?
Upset? Of course not. Why would I be upset?
I do apologize, but with how long that first story was, I fear we just don't have the time for this bit of back and forth today.
Of course you don't.
Today, truly, there is simply too much news. We cannot devote much airtime to your grievances today.
I suppose it's clear now how much I matter.
I don't know. Could you perhaps just air that voting PSA from 2 weeks back?
Oh, well, it seems you still need me for that.
Actually, I can cue it up right here.
Wait, thought that's what I was here for.
We're still figuring that one out, Denberg, but for now, a word from, well, you.
Oh, 2020. What a year. It is a historic time of pandemics and natural disasters, of civil unrest and activism. This is a time that will be etched into the history books, and the pages of the future are yet to be written. Now is your chance to help shape it, to have your voice heard in such a tumultuous era. All you have to do is vote. If you want to be proud to be an American, then lend your voice, your vote to the process, because it counts. It matters. In 2016, 60% of eligible voters did not vote. By following these few steps, you can be a part of the percentage that decides what these United States will be after the year that has been 2020.
Thank you, Denberg.
I didn't do anything.
Well, you did 2 weeks ago, so thank you for that.
Why am I even here?
It would appear to record my private conversations for everyone else's amusement.
You aren't still upset about that, are you?
Upset? Why would I be upset? Anyhow, here are several updates to our ongoing stories. Beginning in California. On Monday, the state recorded its first Gigafire in modern history, indicating that the massive August complex in the northern counties burned over 1 million acres. This began as several smaller fires in early August that merged while firefighters continued to battle against it. At least 31 lives have been lost in California as a result of fires, and more than 8,000 structures have been destroyed. And on Friday, Hurricane Delta made landfall in storm-battered Louisiana, just 13 miles from where Laura struck only 43 days ago. Massive flooding and power outages have affected hundreds of thousands, and the additional damage will likely set back rebuilding and cleanup efforts that were already underway from the last major storm. That brings us to, well, I hesitate to ask, Denberg, but do you happen to have any strangely true local news for us this week?
I feel you know the answer to that.
Denberg, truly, we all appreciate whatever it is that you do here.
And what exactly might that be?
Well, in part, usually, compiling these very stories, but it appears we will have to forego that.
Wait, Mr. McNally! I mean, sir, if you want, I may have something to fill the void.
Oh, what do you have, young man?
As you know, I am a purveyor of the strange and inexplicable.
That you are.
These might just work for you.
They very well may, Archie. Thank you. After our exhaustive coverage of the outbreak at the Capitol, we must also tell you of a different epidemic infesting the White House lawn. This new plague was discovered last week by a CNN reporter while about to go on the air. He felt something brush against his leg, and looked down to find a raccoon had just grabbed hold of him. And this was only his first encounter. The grounds of the executive mansion have been teeming with so-called trash pandas. This week, the same CNN reporter became a well-shared sensation when another, or perhaps even the same vermin, came after him again, this time while live on the air. He fended it off with the footstool, but later assured viewers that no raccoons were harmed in this exercise. In Japan, police are defending against a much greater threat. They are concerned about turf wars between Japan's largest international crime syndicate, the Yamaguchi-gumi, and a breakaway gang. As this tension escalates, officials have been working to address a pressing issue as Halloween approaches. See, in the port city of Kobe, it has been tradition for costumed children to descend on the Yakuza headquarters, where gang members hand out colorfully decorated bags of sweets and snacks. This has now been banned. In previous years, ordinances preventing the Japanese mafia from passing out candy to children have been attempted, but largely have failed. And lastly, the Seed company by E.W. Gaze faced a ban for an advertisement on the platform Facebook. The advertisement in question featured a photo of onion seeds which the tech giant determined to be overtly sexual. Store manager Jackson McLean defended his post, surmising that the flag may have come from the provocative vegetable's round shapes. Facebook later removed the ban, saying it was likely caused by automated technology. The Seedy predicament aroused a good bit of attention, with McLean saying he sold more Walla Walla onions in the last 3 days than in the last 5 years. Thank you, Archie. Those were indeed unique stories.
I am glad you like them, sir.
Liked might be a bit strong, but I appreciate your effort nonetheless.
Now, if it's okay, Mr. McNally, I have something rather important to report on.
Archie, I just don't believe we have the time. We are still running quite behind after that first story and other delays. It may have to wait until next week.
It is quite big news. and I've been holding off due to our other previously saturated news weeks.
Then patience shall be required once again.
You have time for me, though, right, Jonathan?
Bruce?
I have something important that I need to talk about.
Is it news?
Yes, and it's actually very close to my heart.
Oh, go ahead then, Bruce.
As might be apparent by now, I'm not often taken by the allure of celebrity, unimpressed by the stars and their vapid lifestyles. But today, I am quite stricken by the loss of a legend. On Tuesday, Edward Ludwig Van Halen passed away at the age of 65 after a long, hard-fought battle with throat cancer. Eddie's electrifying stage persona paired with stellar guitar solos were a key part of the family band known as Van Halen. His blazing fast technique popularized the finger-tapping solo, utilizing two hands on the fretboard to play chord flourishes which defined the era of classic rock and inspired generations of musicians. Founding the band with his younger brother Alex and David Lee Roth, they created such hits as Runnin' with the Devil, Hot for Teacher, and Eruption, the latter containing one of the greatest guitar solos of all time. Eddie continued playing into his twilight years as his son Wolfgang joined the band as their bassist in 2006. Losses in the entertainment industry can affect countless individuals. People who are inspired and changed by those who seem larger than life. I am not usually among those affected, but today I join many in mourning. Those left behind often wonder what might have been if they'd simply had more time. But the artists, rather, live their lives to the fullest, always creating, making an impact that will carry on long after they are gone. Perhaps this is best conveyed by their song, I'm the One. We came here to entertain you. Leaving here, we aggravate you. Don't you know it means the same to me? Our thoughts go out to the Van Halen family.
Thank you, Bruce. He will be missed by many. Now we move on to a few final stories that must be covered. First, Netflix has been indicted by a grand jury in Texas for the film Cuties, accusing them of broadcasting lewd material in their state. Texas Senator Ted Cruz has been leading the campaign against the film that depicts young girls performing provocative dances for a competition. The French director of the film, Maimouna Ducour, and Netflix have defended the film, saying it is a social commentary against the sexualization of young children. This all comes after a massive push on various social media platforms to boycott Netflix, and death threats have been made against the director. On Thursday, the FBI charged 13 men with terrorism, conspiracy, and weapon charges in Michigan. At least 6 had allegedly planned to kidnap the state's Democratic governor, Gretchen Whitmer, so that they could try her for treason. The group had taken to extensive plotting for the attack, including weapons training, combat drills, building explosives practice, and surveilling the governor's vacation home. Governor Whitmer laid blame on the president for not condemning white supremacists and violent right-wing groups during last week's debate. The president retorted that the governor has done a terrible job and that Democrats refuse to condemn Antifa, anarchists, looters, and mobs that burn down Democrat-run cities. And our final story is concerning this week's Vice Presidential Debate. A special thank you to our new researcher, Amadis Lee Nieves, who goes by Amy. She witnessed the event from her home and also investigated the issues surrounding the night. We thank you for your help and contribution. The Vice Presidential Debate is often overlooked by voters. But with the president's infection and some concern within the electorate about the age of both presidential candidates, the evening received much more attention than usual. The VP candidates were deemed to be evenly matched as as Senator Kamala Harris has a history as a tough interrogator, specifically in regards to her questioning of officials like Attorney General William Barr, and Vice President Mike Pence is an experienced public speaker, considered to develop strong and thoughtful arguments. The debate began before either of the VP contenders ever reached the stage, as a somewhat heated disagreement about plexiglass preceded the proceedings. After the aforementioned outbreak at the Capitol, the Biden-Harris campaign stated that they wanted to take every safety precaution possible, requesting plexiglass barriers. VP Pence's team argued that there was little medical evidence to support the need for such dividers. Eventually, they agreed to the safety measure, but continued to criticize the request. The night was largely more restrained than the last presidential debate, but it was not without its interruptions and moments that distracted from the policies in question. Perhaps the strongest portion for both candidates was regarding the economy. Mr. Pence looked backward, pointing out the recovery that occurred in the wake of substantial job loss from the pandemic. He highlighted the administration's efforts to cut taxes and roll back regulations. He also claimed stimulus payments as a win for the president. Senator Harris rather looked to the future. She outlined a plan where a shift toward renewable energies and green production would create more jobs and help build infrastructure. Mr. Pence countered that she was leaving out the tax increases this would require. For some of the other segments of the debate, Vice President Pence repeated talking points often stated by the Trump campaign, while Senator Harris more often revealed less heard policy ideas. When it came to justice reform, Harris discussed banning chokeholds, a registry for police offenses, decriminalizing marijuana, and ending private prisons, while Pence stated that the Trump administration supports law enforcement and condemns rioting. In regards to coronavirus, Pence said that the president saved lives with the travel ban, and that he trusts the American people to make good choices, whereas Harris discussed plans for contact tracing, testing, and vaccination, while also working to make these items free for the American people. They both more or less sidestepped questions about the U.S. relationship with China, the fate of the Supreme Court, a peaceful transition of power between presidents, and the role of a vice president in the event of presidential disability. Much of the discussion after the debate was about none of this, but rather the nature of how the two performed on the stage. Vice President Pence was often noted for interrupting the senator, and many pundits focused on Kamala Harris's facial expressions following some of the vice president's remarks. It is important to remember that Denberg, do you hear that? I'm not sure how that got in the booth, but could you help with... Of course not. Very well, I will just... As I was saying, it is important that we avoid getting distracted by the inconsequential things surrounding these debates, and even the antics of the candidates. You must focus your attention on what they are truly saying, and what policies they plan for our nation. That is what you should vote on, come November 3rd. All the other noise simply is what it is. Thank you, and good night.
This program was written and performed by Roger J. Thatcher and Dennis Schenberg. You are encouraged to obtain a subscription to this broadcast with the simple selection of a button below. Furthermore, you can indicate your appreciation by giving us the old thumbs up. Did you have any thoughts about any of our stories? Please comment them below. Or to read those of our newsmen, tune your Twitter to @RadioYNT. And as always, be sure to tune in next week to hear tomorrow's news of yesterday. Then.
I have something very important to ask everyone. Does anyone know where the complimentary cookies in the break room might have gone?
I told you there would be retribution.
But, Mr. McNally.
My retribution has begun.
No, not the cookies.
It was always the cookies.